I feel like I am watching history unfold before me every single day.
Whatever happens each night, in the morning, everybody goes to work.
You use as much technology as you can to put distance between, the humans and the danger.
You see one thing in news, right? And you see another one when you come here.
Every single night, they do updates with data that they are collecting out at the front.
Ukraine is changing the history.
It just starts with somebody says, hey, let's, start building FPVs on our own.
American dream.
There is an extreme resourcefulness for everything.
Hey, welcome to podcast Ukraine. Here we are talking about people who built Ukraine during full-scale war. And I'm really happy to introduce my guest today, Deborah Fairlamb, entrepreneur, investor, co-founder of Green Flag Ventures, a real friend of Ukraine, and a person who shapes Ukrainian tech future. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me. I was waiting for it. How are you doing these
I'm
days
doing well today.
in Kyiv?
Thank you. There's a lot going on. There's next week, there's a big defense tech conference out in Lviv. And so starting to feel the energy for that. And everything is okay. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for finding a slot
No.
for this
Happy
podcast.
to.
Okay, so you have an interesting history with Ukraine, which lasts for almost 20 years. Tell, please, your story with Ukraine, how it started, and why Ukraine.
So it didn't start out looking for Ukraine per se, but actually what happened was I was living and working in New York. And believe it or not, I had done a business trip to St. Petersburg this was back in 1994. And I had been somewhat fascinated by how, the Soviet Union, how do these countries adapt after sort of everything that you believed in one morning you wake up and it's no longer that way. And after that business trip, I had actually decided I wanted to learn some of the language. And so I hired a woman who was from St. Petersburg to just teach me basics of, the language. And after a few months, she had said I needed a cultural experience. And I'm like, okay. And it happened that there was a Russian band that was playing in New York. And so she sent me off to see this Russian rock band with her son.
Wow.
I was the only American in the entire place. It was all Russians, Ukrainians, and Poles.
And cultural exchange.
But it was great. The band was data. And so it wasn't seating. It was everybody was just standing watching the band. And a guy came up and asked me to dance. And I said yes. And turned out he was my future husband. So it was just kind of one of those strange things in terms of it. So it started with how do countries adapt after massive change? And I think that was one of the first things really that was interesting. So we ended up getting married. We lived in the United States for almost 7 years before moving to Ukraine. And during the time we were in the U.S., many of his Ukrainian friends were there, so I spent a lot of time around Ukrainians, had access, to food, to songs, to the culture. It was a very tight-knit group of people, and it's similar to the way relationships are here, which is you've got a group of friends and everybody relies upon each other, and it's both social, but then sometimes there's business back and forth. And at the time, that was also where I think a lot of relationships in the United States were, the U.S. was undergoing cultural changes, and it still continues to, where people are drifting off more and more in like isolation. So there weren't as many bigger friend groups. There's not as much socializing. And so for me, a lot of the cultural appreciation and things I started to identify as what I appreciated about Ukrainian culture did start back at that time, just through Nick and our friends, and his parents were there too. So I had a Ukrainian mother-in-law and father-in-law, and then after our daughter was born, Ukrainian babusa, who I learned an awful lot from as our daughter grew up, kind of half Ukrainian, half American. So that was the introduction.
Wow, what an interesting introduction, Wow, so you found out a lot about Ukrainian history and Ukrainian culture and songs and people. And then, so you lived in the US, right? But then you decided to move to Ukraine.
We did. We moved. We ended up
How
moving
did
over
you
here. It was
come
in
up with this decision?
2007. So actually, I was working in New York. We were both working in New York. We both, Nick was doing corporate mergers and acquisitions. I did private wealth management. And we both had terrific careers. You know, the American dream, had the big house in the suburbs, had a beautiful daughter. And I have to tell you, for me, and it ended up being an incredibly stressful life, because part of the glamour and glory of working on Wall Street and at a big job is also you're expected to put in 12-hour work days. And if you have an hour and a half commute each way, you know, you can do it when you don't have children.
Yeah.
But after our daughter was born, I recognized that the way that we had built our life was not going to be tenable long term. So I would be getting up at, 6 a.m. I'd get ready for work. I would wake our daughter up when she was still half asleep. I'd put her in the car, take her to a nanny's, who then would watch her before daycare.
Hold
Then she went to daycare. Then the nanny would pick her up, and I'd pick her up from the nanny's at 7:30, 8:30 at night. And it was just not a life that
Too
I
intense.
wanted. It was, well, it wasn't just intense. It was extremely unbalanced. And so we started talking about alternatives. And the Orange Revolution had happened in 2004. And so all of a sudden at that point, there was all of these new possibilities, and there was an energy that was starting to grow. And so when we were looking at what are some of the alternatives, Ukraine actually came up. And because, again, I had been familiar with the culture, it was not like a shock to me to think about moving over here, just because I'd been immersed, with friends and family at that point for a number of years. And I had been I really was at a point where I desperately needed to get out, just for mental health, all of it. I knew that we needed a change. And so I figured, well, I'm making a change. Let's make it a really big one. And so we honestly went from a 6-bedroom house, which we sold, got rid of the contents of the entire house, and moved to Ukraine with, I think it was 6 suitcases, and I'd had about 4 boxes shipped over in advance, and went from 4,000 square feet to a 120 square meter apartment. And looking back, it was the best thing that we, ever I could have done. And when we did it initially, it was, well, we'll just go see what happens. And really have just never looked back.
And since then, it was 2008?
That was 2007. Yeah.
Since then, Ukraine has become your home. Can you say something like that?
Oh, definitely.
Really?
I mean, I think that once we arrived here, I immediately felt comfortable here. It was not difficult to find work. I ended up working for a regional bank, and I was doing work here and in the country of Georgia. So I was going back and forth. And one of the things that I really appreciated was that people were very open to the fact that I had Western experience, Western skills with investing in business development, and people were really willing to work with me and let me introduce new ideas. And at the same time, I was learning ideas and things about what was happening here. And so for me, it was and continues to be, just at a professional level, extraordinarily interesting, because if you think about all of the change that Ukraine has gone through, you can start with 1991, and then there was the big pivot year, year 2004, then again 2013-14.
Yeah.
There are very set points where dramatic things have happened and kind of push Ukraine into these growth modes going forward. So one of the things is I've also felt very privileged to be here, because I feel like I am watching history unfold before me every single day. And with every point where Ukraine has to adapt and has the opportunity to change and grow, it does so. And so I am both able to watch from the outside, but also to take part in it. And so that for me is just, it's brilliant.
Wow, you already answering to my next question. Because you live here for quite a long time. Before full-scale war, during full-scale war, you found this balance here you were looking for,
Oh, absolutely.
like work-life balance, the one.
Well, it's both. Yes, it's much more of a work-life balance, but there is going back to one of the things I said about the community and the connections with the Ukrainian friend group in the United States. That was here, but writ large, and so it's this combination of people who are close. But then, you build these connections. And one of the things that I sort of think about is Ukraine is actually like a very horizontal society. If you think about Russia, Russia is a very vertical society. There's somebody at the top and everything trickles down. Ukraine is completely different. It is horizontal and there's all of these like links all the way through. And it, I think, is one of Ukraine's sort of hidden strengths, or something that people don't necessarily talk about or acknowledge. But it is those sort of friendships and connections that allow people to do things when you don't have the normal resources, or you don't have somebody from above saying, yes, this needs to be done, or no, don't do that. There is an extreme resourcefulness for everything. And you see it, multiplied a thousandfold with the full-scale invasion. But you see it also in everyday life, and you see it, with the people in your neighborhood, and people take care of each other. I know every single person in my building. I know all of my neighbors in the neighborhood,
Community.
and it is a strong sense of community, and so that part of it is very much of what I think is, like I said, a sort of a hidden strength of Ukraine, but it's also one of the things that I love about this country and about being able to work, and the friendships, and just even cultural side and the arts and all of these different things. They're not individual spheres. They're all sort of interlinked.
Wow. I read you saying that Ukraine is one of the most resourceful, or even the most resourceful country in the world. It's really surprising in a positive way for me, a person from Ukraine, to hear your story, because usually it's vice versa. People from Ukraine who have some American dream. I have a lot of friends like this and a lot of acquaintances who live with this American dream and who go there. Not always it's a successful one, but usually it's a story like this. So your story is definitely like a teaser to some movie with all this cultural exchange and stuff like this. And also for me, it's really interesting the things that you are doing, because you got an expertise building Ukrainian tech ecosystem right now. And it's an interesting task. It's an interesting and tough time we live in. And I'm really curious to find out more about it. I read that you are investing into dual use technologies, right? I even Googled it. So this is the one which is for civilian and military usage, right?
Yeah.
So could you please explain more on this idea and how your work looks like from this perspective?
Sure. So I'm going to take a step back and hit some of the things you were talking about to start. So my background most definitely is not defense. And actually, initially, it wasn't even technology. So coming from Wall Street, I approached things through business development and investments. And had done that initially. First, I had mentioned with the bank, but then really sort of worked as a consultant for a number of years for both Ukrainian companies that were looking to grow and find investment from the outside, and also with Western companies that were looking to come to Ukraine and try to understand how to do business and who they should partner with and that sort of thing. So I came at it first from the business side, and had done that for a number of years. And then in 2018, I actually was working on a project where I was involved in structuring what is now called the Ukrainian Startup Fund. So it was a fund that was taking government money and putting it into the tech ecosystem in form of grants. And during that time, I started working with the tech ecosystem to understand, what their needs were and how this was going to work. So that was kind of my transition from just sort of general business to more specifically within the tech ecosystem. And the Ukrainian tech ecosystem was growing like crazy. It was doing amazingly well, especially after the 2014, the initial invasion. and the ecosystem had been growing at about 30% per annum. So it was growing. It was also sort of starting to pivot away from a lot of super smart people working in the outsourcing companies. And they were really beginning to understand that they could build their own businesses. And so there was all of this, startups were starting to spin off. And so the startup ecosystem was starting to grow. And so coming in, working on that startup fund, right in the middle of that was just, I was, again, kind of dropped into this ecosystem, just like Ukraine writ large, of this extraordinary boom of creativity and, people very dynamic and looking for ways to both build themselves, build their companies, and understanding it's building Ukraine as well. So I had worked just broadly in the tech sector up until even during, or after the full-scale invasion started. And it was I guess, it was early 2023 when I was introduced to the guy who is my business partner and co-founder with Green Flag Ventures. His name is Justin Zief. He is based in the U.S., but he had come to Ukraine early in the war because he had some military background, and he was here for about 3 weeks driving medical supplies around the country in April of 2022. And he met a bunch of founders while he was here. And he had been completely blown away by the skills, the capabilities, the drive, kind of everything that he met when he came to Ukraine, saw what it was like, even in the crazy days in the beginning of the war. He saw that there was something different. And so he had gone back to the U.S.
You see one thing in news, right? And you see another one when you come here.
Entirely different. It is. I will get to that in a second.
Sure.
Yeah. No, because it's an important point. So anyway, so Justin had gone back to the U.S., couldn't get the idea that he wanted to do something different, not just donate or come to volunteer once in a while. And he came up with the idea for this fund. And then fast forward about 5 months, or I'm not sure exactly what, between idea and when we were introduced. But we had a mutual friend. And the guy called me. He said, "Hey, Deb, there's this crazy American who wants to start an investment fund." And I'm like, "Heck yeah, I'll talk to him. I'll talk to anybody who wants to invest in Ukraine. I'm happy to explain what I've seen, and I'll help him any way I could." And Justin and I just really clicked in the context of what the vision was, what we both saw as, the opportunity and the need. For as long as I've been in the tech sector in general, the only thing really that Ukrainians need are capital and connections. They have the skills, they have the knowledge, they have years and years of being, extraordinary back-end developers, DevOps, systems engineers, hardware, software integrators. That's the skill base was all here. And so as people, start to go off and to build your own company, really it's capital and connections. And that's actually what Justin and I very much felt that we could both bring. Obviously, so one of the things that happened, and people may not understand this, but Ukraine did not have a big defense tech ecosystem before the war. I think there were 2 companies that were doing drones, and they were both for agriculture purposes.
Okay.
So this ecosystem that has grown really came from what had been the private sector, the private tech sector, people who had been doing, product companies or fintech or SaaS or B2B. And they just pivoted in the context of having brothers and university friends and fathers and uncles and mothers who were out at the front saying, there are gaps, we need this.
We need help, yeah.
And so it was this whole ecosystem-wide initiative to start figuring out how to get things out to the front. And in the beginning, it was chaotic, and they were just buying drones off the shelf, and then there were, it got harder in terms of getting enough in. The need continued to grow. And so somebody, it just starts with somebody says, hey, let's, start building FPVs on our own. And so then, this whole thing has just built off of, what came next. There was no top-down marching orders. It was again, the horizontal community
Yeah.
working together.
I know someone, we can do it for my brother, father, because they do need it.
What it's like.
Let's go home and let's do something at night.
That's exactly what it is. And so it has worked that way for, funding projects, for building projects, for just all of these things that we are now 3.5 years into this invasion. All of these things have organically grown up, and it's this incredibly cooperative experience. And again, most of this is very homegrown in the context of there is not huge amounts of government money coming in for research and development or anything like that. So this really is a Ukrainian-grown ecosystem. So to get to the dual use, what you were talking about, so we are looking at, we invest in Ukrainian-founded dual use companies. And when we say dual use, what we, exactly like you said, is that there's sort of both a military application, but that there's another application as well. And it's not that we are squeamish or queasy about investing in defense tech, but in the context of understanding that right now, this is a huge, you can sell very easily in Ukraine because there is a tremendous amount of need. But the minute you are going into other markets, trying to sell only into militaries, you are facing the procurement processes, procedures. It is very hard, not just for Ukrainian startups, for any startup to be able to get through a Department of Defense or Ministry of Defense pipeline to sell in. It's also a very long period. So for a startup, any startup, to be able to bridge that, they call it a valley of death, literally, in terms of funding and actually getting the client. Our belief is that these companies need to, our portfolio companies need to have other places to sell their products in the meantime, just to help them bridge that.
Wow, that's interesting. So it's, for example, as for me, the person not from defense tech, and so it's like, for example, the drone, which can bring medicine and which can also work for military at the battlefield, like drone, or other issues like cybersecurity, other spheres you're working in and investing in. It's also AI, startups, and others, right?
It is. So we're not investing directly into like AI in the context of the next ChatGPT. One of the things that's happening in Ukraine, and especially since the introduction of some of the more open and accessible tools like ChatGPT, it's utilizing AI to be able to enhance what is already being done. So one of the things that has been really fascinating about everything that is sort of developing is, traditionally when you think of defense tech, you think of armored personnel vehicles or tanks or battleships or planes. But really,
battlefield.
Exactly. Outside of that and behind it, like the software and the data and the information that is there is actually extremely important. And one of the things that has come out of Russia's invasion is that the Ukrainians have been exceptionally good at collecting data, analyzing it, and using it in the context of strategic advantages. Now, this is both for tactics and strategies out on the front, but also for developing some of these new products that we are starting to see. And so with drones, drones is a big word that, it can be UAVs, so unmanned aerial vehicles, or UGVs, which are unmanned ground vehicles or unmanned sea vehicles. And Ukraine has done exceptional things in building, unmanned vehicles in all three of those domains. Ukraine largely cleared the Russian, Navy out of the Black Sea with their own USVs and their own rockets and missiles that they had used. It was not the West, and it was not Russia's kindness of heart that, opening the grain corridor. No, they pulled back from the Black Sea because the Ukrainians were really good at sinking their ships. And I will point to your symbol back there, which I absolutely love. So, people talk about drones thinking mostly about the air drones, but what I want to emphasize is that there really have been extraordinary developments in multiple areas. So, and again, going back to I started talking about the data. The data really matters, because one of the things that's starting to happen is there is more and more, you hear the word autonomy, autonomous drones. Well, what does autonomous mean? It means that there is some level of decision making that is happening within, an individual drone or between drones. So it's not just like one person, one gun, or one person, one drone. It's the capabilities and the technology are advancing very quickly. So it's moving towards much more communication between the different systems. And so
it becomes complicated.
Well, it's complicated, but it's more efficient in some ways. So I think it was about 18 months ago that I first started hearing people saying, send robots, save humans. And I think that part of what people really do need to understand is that save humans is one of the motivating things that actually is going on in Ukraine. Ukraine is purely defensive position. It did not start the war. It did not instigate it. It did not do anything. It is defending itself. Ukraine understands its most valuable resource is its people. And so even in the context of soldiers out at the front and, saving civilians, if you sort of look across many, many different things that are happening in Ukraine, it is largely about saving people. Yes. And so in the context of how do you continue to fight, because the Russians do not care about their civilians and, or their soldiers. And you hear, of these terrible meat waves, which is just the worst word in the world, but it unfortunately explains exactly how the Russians, send their soldiers out to the front, and they just literally keep sending them down a path. And even if the Ukrainians have a target, a line of sight, and are killing them, they just keep coming and coming and coming and coming. Ukraine does not do that to its soldiers. And so in the context of how do you, save as many people, you use as much technology as you can to put distance between, the humans and the danger. So that is a driving force of a lot of these developments. And so Ukraine continues to do this. And in terms of even, once this war, I'll call it this phase of the war, because however this ends right now, Russia is always going to be Ukraine's neighbor. And Ukraine is going to have to be in a much stronger defensive position, going forward. It is going to be Ukraine's reliance on technology that is going to continue to keep as many people away from future threats, which there definitely will be, because Russia is not going anywhere. So,
yeah. I feel like I'm at some lecture, and
I'm sorry,
but it's in a positive way. In a positive way, I'm overwhelmed by information I get, by your knowledge, how much knowledge you possess about it, and only in a positive way. Finding out these things about, again, I also always emphasize that we are invested in developing defense tech, not military tech, because people get it wrong sometimes.
There's
overseas,
military
right?
tech. No, they're doing long-range cruise missiles here. I mean, that's what the Flamingo was.
Yeah, and people also.
So yeah, there is that too.
Yeah, there are some biases about it, right?
No, Ukraine has to defend itself.
defend.
No,
defend.
But defense does not. Defense includes hitting back. You think of a boxing match. If you are doing nothing but blocking, you are never, ever, ever going to take your opponent down. There has to be, when you are put in a position where you are defending yourself, that also means you have to be able to strike back. So there is no shame in it. There is no nothing in it, other than it is very clear that Ukraine needs a full range of capabilities. As for certain people investing in certain things, again, for us, it's just purely a business decision, understanding that it is very hard for startups. But if somebody came in and handed me $100 million tomorrow and said, go start a long-range missile factory, I'm all for it. I have no problem with it. So it's just, a total matter of the decision.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. For me, as a person from here, I do understand about defense tech, but yeah, and I get that there might be a lot of people overseas who don't want to invest into it because it's supporting war or stuff like this, right?
Well, that's a naive perspective
Yeah, sure.
because no, it is. If you do not have border security, nothing else that you're doing matters, and Ukraine has sort of proven that. So if you do not, the West has taken an awful lot for granted for the last 80 or so years since the end of World War II in terms of the structure and the safety and the security. And, between NATO and the United States, which has an enormous, Defense Department budget, really did provide an umbrella of protection for a lot of Western Europe. And that actually, if they weren't spending a lot on defense, they were able to spend it on education and culture and all of these things that have really sort of helped a lot of these countries grow. But it is both ignorant and hypocritical to say, I don't want to invest in defense if that defense is in any way, shape, or form going to play a part in securing your country. And I know that a lot of people in the West, I'll just even start right over the border, in terms of Western Europe, they can't wrap their brains around the fact that this is ever going to be anything other than the contact line between Russia and Ukraine, because that just sort of really challenges their worldview of how everything has been. But if you look at what happened, 2 nights ago with Russia very, very deliberately sending those drones into Poland, what Russia is doing is absolutely poking and provoking the West to see where its lines are, how far it can push. Russia is not going to fully invade Western Europe. I understand that they don't have the capacity, but what they can do is they can break they'll expose the fault lines in terms of, say, even NATO and Article 5. If all the Russians do is create fractures within the European framework, either between the European nation states or within the NATO framework, if somebody says, no, we're not going to come to the defense of another NATO member, that essentially renders everything moot. It doesn't exist anymore. That is what they are doing. And what that is that it just continues to weaken the bond between Europe, the bond between European countries and NATO, European countries and the United States. So all of these things are precursors to how else can Russia be disruptive to Western Europe. And it's everything from GPS denial, which is a fact of life out on the front line. There is no GPS out on the front. But the Russians also are using that to disrupt commercial flights. The Baltics, the Nordic states, and even a week and a half ago over Bulgaria, when Ursula von der Leyen her plane was GPS jammed, and her pilots had to land the plane with paper maps because they had lost all of the satellite controlled coordination. So this is all absolute hybrid warfare that Russia is waging against countries other than Ukraine. And it is in the context of this, this whole thing is not just the Ukrainians wouldn't let anybody speak Russian, or whatever, and of the 20 nonsense things that the Russians just cycle through in terms of why this started. At the end of the day, it is just a very different philosophical worldview of the way Russia sees the world and their role in it as an imperial powerhouse, and that it is theirs to dictate and control, and that includes all of the countries around it, versus the European democratic, individual rights, human rights. They're just very different worldviews. So this is clash of worldviews, and it just happens that Ukraine, by its nature, is much more aligned with the European values and the European, freedom and the goals of education and development and community and all of these things. So that is really where that is. So I'm just saying, for anybody who is not looking at defense, I'm going to loop back now. You really do need to understand that it's maybe not just the missiles, but cybersecurity and understanding how the Russians are attacking with that, and the need to have capabilities to defend against the kind of things that the Russians are going to continue to do. So GPS denial, sending drones into Poland.
Yeah.
There have been reports of drones over military bases in Germany. They have to start having ways to react to these. And right now, it's the Ukrainians who are developing the countermeasures for all of these things, or if not countermeasures, at least how to work, when these things are happening. These are So everything that is being developed in Ukraine right now has absolute applicability for, other
All the
Western
countries.
allied nations.
Wow. It's been an extensive one and really interesting one. No, it's really interesting. When I'm looking at news, with all these drones and other things with other countries, airports closed, GPS denials and stuff like this. Something I didn't know. I found out from you, and I'm thinking where we are going. In this crazy world.
But I'm going to stay with the Ukrainians because I trust them more than anybody else. Actually, I'll tell you a funny story. When COVID sort of became clear it was going to be a thing in those first couple of weeks, I was working with the USAID project. And there was a bunch of Americans in the project, and they kind of said, look, anybody who's an American, who wants to go back to the United States, we fully understand. We don't know what's going to happen. And I thought about it for about 30 seconds, and I thought, okay, if this really is the end of the world, and if there's all kinds of disruptions, would I rather be in the United States or would I rather be with the Ukrainians? And I'm like, I'm not leaving. I'm staying with the Ukrainians. They are the best problem solvers everywhere. And it was the funniest thing because all of a sudden you watch the toilet paper fights that broke out in the United States. There was no disruption. There was no drama. Things closed down, but everybody still figured out how to do it. My daughter was in school here in a Ukrainian public school. She was back. She was online within, I don't know, they had set up online schooling. I think it was within 4 days. So they switched to online. But but they had the kids back in school, within about 4 weeks. And there's ways to solve problems. And Ukrainians, there's not the drama, there's not the emotion, there's not the, oh, woe is me, victimhood. It's just shit happens. Let's move forward, figure it out, and keep going.
Yeah.
And it's a very different way of approaching problems. And I think it's one of the things that it just aligns with how I am personally. I don't particularly like a lot of drama or emotion. I think it's nonsense. I don't particularly like the victimhood sort of mentality that has overtaken huge narratives.
Yeah.
And because I will tell you the truth, it doesn't make sense to me. When you claim victimhood, you are not only saying something happened to me, but you are continuing to give away your power to somebody else.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. And so even now, I don't think most Ukrainians, in fact, I will say this differently. I don't ever sort of see a victimhood mentality here. It's not, feel sorry for me or, this. And it's just this is happening. This is what we're doing to respond to it. But there's none of the emotion, hand-wringing drama that goes along with it. So
I have some stories, you reminded me of them, regarding problem solving. I have a friend from Ukraine. She relocated to Great Britain, and she lives in some village close to London. And when they have some little snow, the railways don't work at all. And at the same time, I'm here in Ukrainian railways. There's a lot of shelling all over Ukraine, and I'm just texting her, hello, Lana. I'm okay. I'm in train. Everything's fine. I have my tea. I have my food. I'm talking to neighbors and everything. And you come in time, right? You arrive in time because I use a lot of railways, a lot of trains, and a lot of stories like that. And people from abroad, they another problem of victimizing. I told you that when I travel and when I see people from abroad at different conferences, when they hear first question, usually it's small talk, where are you from, right? I remember that first year of war, for me it was so hard. I'm a sensitive person and I didn't want to tell all my stories. Sometimes I could even start crying because I was taking it very personally. And I remember this first question, where are you from? I'm like, I'm proud to be Ukrainian, but I don't want to tell to everyone my story. And each time, and I could see in the eyes of people, or they could even say, I feel so sorry for you. And that sometimes I take 5-10 minutes of explanation that they don't have to feel sorry for me. And I do spend a lot of time on it. And efforts, of course, if it's worth doing it. If I see that I want to explain to this person, sometimes I just don't care, right?
Sometimes it's not worth it.
And I really, and this podcast is also to show, the idea is to show people who live here, people like you who decide to live here, though you could live elsewhere, and people who believe in Ukraine. I think that people abroad, people original, not from here, who haven't been here yet, which is a problem. I would like to take as many people here as possible and to show them around these amazing places we work from, amazing theaters, art galleries, anything. When my friends from abroad come, I have a few days to show them around and to make sure that they are safe. We have some hotels with underground, where they can feel safer, because I understand you cannot be ready for it. Some people can react, to
people respond
alerts. It's okay. It's not normal thing to live with it. We are adopted already, but it's not normal to live with it. And I do want to show the Ukraine to as many people as possible, and to change their perspective of it. So that's why I'm coming to next question. Whether abroad, especially since full-scale war started, there are a lot of stereotypes about Ukrainian products or Ukrainian startups, or generally about situation here, and whether people are eager to come and to invest. What do you think about it?
I don't know that there's stereotypes. I think now everybody gets the word Ukraine drones. It took about 2 years of us, everybody talking about this, and things before the West really started to just at least use the word drones. Now, again, drones are many, many things, different categories. It's fixed wing, it's rotos, it's all of these things. But at least they've got that part. And the thing that's very important is what I don't think people really, really do understand is how the fundamental nature of this war has changed, and it is not ever going back to the old way of fighting, tanks leading and that kind of thing. Really, the use of drones out on the front to essentially replace, an AK-47 or a machine gun, and as replacement for artillery. Now, there is still a place for artillery, but there is absolutely also more capabilities that you have, with drones. And the drones have proven devastating against things like tanks. There were $500 drones that took out $10 million tanks. And so these are able to be very precise, and they change the way that the fighting is happening. And one thing to understand is this is not just, Ukraine, Russia. So Russia is seeing and learning and adapting with all of this. They have North Korean troops in Russia, and fighting alongside the Russians. So their soldiers are learning these new methods of fighting and of using drones. The Chinese, there's a lot of Chinese components in a lot of the Russian weapons or the drones and missiles and rockets that come into Ukraine. So this is not just that's just a war, Ukraine, Russia. No. This is the new paradigm for how war is going to be fought, because there's this incredible asymmetry on a number of levels. So one, if you think about the traditional defense tech world, it is an extremely long procurement process. It would take years to build the technology. You buy a plane and they're not going to deliver it for 8 years. Very expensive, exquisite, really great products. But the problem is that those have all been shown to be vulnerable, for the most part, to this new warfare. Planes are the one thing that are a little bit exempt, but ships are vulnerable, tanks are vulnerable, APVs are vulnerable. So all of those ground-based things are very different. What is happening here is extremely fast. We talked about development and iteration. And somebody weeks, and right? There's updates for software almost nightly. One of our portfolio companies, every single night, they do updates with data that they are collecting out at the front. So it's a nightly update of data that is collecting certain information. So that iteration cycle of both the development as well as the change, as well as like the software updates, it doesn't exist in the West. And so there's that asymmetry. The next asymmetry is just the sheer numbers. Again, if they produce 500 tanks a year, that's a lot. Ukrainians are producing more than 4 million drones a year. So the sheer number, and so are the Russians. And we all know how many of the Shaheds and Gerons that they're producing, that are coming over. So that just the sheer number of things that are being used in warfare is dramatically increased. There's the price point, in terms of, again, $500 drones versus, some of the drones in the U.S. are cheap at $100,000 a drone,
Really?
$10,000 a drone. So there is such an asymmetry in the dollars, and the United States is a very wealthy country, but you cannot sustain that if your enemy, if you have 10 items and your enemy has 1,000, you are just going to lose on the math. So in the context of how this is sort of building out and where this is going. Where was I going with this?
Regarding people who invest, whether they have stereotypes about investing or not, and how they about investment into Ukrainian startups.
So to bring it back to the investing within the startups, a lot of people who are not here just sort of don't understand this. Sure. So there is a lot about just the way the war is being fought that people don't necessarily understand. When you go then over to the startups and the things that they are building, there is that first part. Most investors out there were not new defense tech investors. 6 months ago, they were investing in crypto or fintech or biotech.
Quick switch.
Exactly. So there is the understanding that there's a gap with that. There is also the gap that people tend to like to invest in things that they understand, but also that are closer to them. Really within the United States, one of the reasons everything ended up, like Silicon Valley kind of at least became one of the first hubs was the money was there. And so, yes, there was tech there, but then the money came and then the more tech came because really it is usually the tech that goes to the money as opposed to the money going to the tech. Yeah. And so this is a situation where it's harder. The tech can't go out because the tech is in use. The tech is being changed on a daily basis. So this is a situation where it's more about there just is almost this insurmountable barrier of, at least at this time, the money needs to come here. And so that means people coming to Ukraine to start to understand more. Like you said, when most people come to Ukraine, you almost don't have to sell anything. You just have to get them here and it's eyes wide open. And they're like, this is not what I expected. If they're going to Lviv or coming to Kyiv or early on. And there's usually enough of that wow click that this is not what I expected, that people then actually are open to understanding a lot more. It's that first, this is not what I expected. It is not a gray, grimy post-Soviet country with really bad service. I mean, it's a dynamic, young, thriving, bright country, society with great service, great food, great, culture, clothes, all of this stuff that in many cases actually is sort of outshines the West. I have to say one of the things that's so funny is this is such a digital society and with DIA and all of these other things, and it's so convenient and it's so easy. When you try to do transactions outside of Ukraine, it's like,
give me a bank account.
Exactly,
How to start so much bureaucracy.
Exactly. So
more people come here, right?
Well, there are more people, but not nearly to the level of what the capacity that this ecosystem has to absorb. So next week is the Brave One, which is Brave. I'll just explain that a little bit. So Brave One is an entity that was set up about it was in the summer of 2023, so it was just 2 years ago. And it was essentially set up by about 6 different ministries and agencies within the government of Ukraine because they were starting to see all this new technology, but they needed a way to filter it, to understand if it was needed. So Brave One was set up first and foremost just as kind of a funnel through which tech could be proposed to the government. They could evaluate it. They could say, yes, this is something that may be applicable, or no, we really don't need that. So that's kind of how the ecosystem started to grow. But what has ended up happening, because they were that funnel, Brave One has also now evolved into sort of like the platform that showcases all of this new defense tech. So they did their first conference a year ago in October. I think that there was something like 2,000 people that came. Maybe it was 1,800, something like that. They did a conference in February. They had to close it because they had gotten more than 3,000 applications, and I think they had to max it at like 2,500. For the conference next week, there's going to be at least 5,000 people there. So in 1 year, the interest and everything has more than doubled. And so people are coming in for that. And that's a great sort of venue and a platform for people to see the whole ecosystem writ large, because most people have no idea. I saw an article in the Jerusalem Post that somebody had mentioned about the development of the Israeli ecosystem, and Israel has a brilliant tech ecosystem, absolutely. And since October, when Hamas had invaded in Israel, they have had a surge of defense tech down there as well. And they were, this article was kind of bragging about 200 new tech companies in Israel. And they said, but we don't know anything about the ecosystem in Ukraine, or that there's nothing there. And so I wrote back and I'm like, whoa,
No,
wait a minute here.
stop
Wait
it.
a minute. I've got 1,500 companies up here. You're talking about 200. Let's talk about this. So a lot of it is just people not understanding truly the dynamic nature of, again, how the war is being fought, how this ecosystem has responded, the sophistication of what people are building, the implications for this as an ecosystem and a driver of development for Ukraine economically when this ends, and then the importance of what the Ukrainians have built, and not just built, but the knowledge that is behind it and being shared with the West in terms of their defense. And it doesn't matter if it's European defense against Russia or American defense against something with China in the South China Sea. It's pretty much the same. There's a lot of the same lessons and the same technology and tools that are all there.
But I'm thinking of it. I see your posts on LinkedIn when you're commenting on different. You're very active there. I'm following you, and I get to know a lot of information worldwide about, and generally about Ukraine, about how war is going on from your LinkedIn. So thank you for being so active, because sometimes we really lack some resources, like reliable resources and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's helpful. I actually don't like initiating posts. What I do is try and pick things up and like give context for it, because
context is important again.
It is. It's just helping people understand what is happening, and because I get it. Not everybody can come to a country that is, in this situation. To your point, not everybody is comfortable with air raid sirens, and it is not easy to get here. Every time if you are going from Kiev to any European city, it's going to take you a minimum of about 36 hours between the train, the border, and then trying to catch a flight out and timing that. For me, the average is about 36 hours. And so it's difficult to get people in here. So I fully get it and I understand it. And anybody who does make that journey, I have a huge amount of respect and gratitude, because they have taken, in essence, another 3 or 4 days out of their life to do nothing but to travel in and out of the country. So
and enjoy the trains and stuff like this, and borders and everything. Interesting. If to talk about maybe it's an NDA, but if you could outline the most interesting startups you've invested into, or some startups which you really admire. You just mentioned the startup, which is the defense tech product, which is software, which is being updated each night. So I guess the speed is really quick. Maybe something which you can share more, like with title, without title, whatever, which really impressed you lately. If it's possible to impress you with what's going on.
I'm impressed I'm impressed and inspired on a daily basis. I'm not kidding. I mean, really, what we are seeing is quite extraordinary. So I think one of the things, and this is just not a company that we have in our portfolio yet, but one of the areas that we see a lot happening right now are the anti-Shahed, the interceptors. And there is sort of this whole new well, I must call it a new class of interceptors that are being developed in terms of how to stop these things. Because again, going back to the concept of asymmetry, those shaheds may cost, the cheap end literally, and some of them are essentially decoys. They're maybe $30,000.
Okay.
Some of the more expensive ones that have the jet engines and that are flying much higher and faster are, several $100,000. But if you look at what is needed to take those down, if you're shooting a Patriot or some of those, again, there's not enough Patriot missiles in the world to take down the number of Shaheds that are in the world. And they cannot build the Patriots as fast as the Russians can build these other ones. So the math is off. So there has to be something new that is in there in terms of being able to adapt to just the volume of what the Russians are sending. So there's a lot of Ukrainian companies working on things in this space. And so that's actually been very interesting to watch in terms of how they are trying to solve for those problem sets.
Yeah, because now at night we have about 800 Shaheds all over Ukraine, or even more,
it's
and it's
extraordinary.
crazy.
It is. And Ukraine, I have to say, if the air defense in this country, I go to bed thanking God for, all of those people, because it's volunteers, it's military, it's the border, National Guard. What they are able to shoot down, it is incredible, the percentages, and things do get through. And, there are terrible stories on a regular basis, if not just from Kiev, but from across Ukraine every single day, of civilians who are killed by, either the drones or the missiles that are coming through.
Yeah.
But on a comparative basis, the Ukrainians have done nothing short of miraculous work in, being able to do a lot of these interceptions. But as the Russians are adapting the technology as well, the Ukrainians have to respond. And so that is one area that we see interesting things. As a general rule for our portfolio, we are not investing in either the UAV, so the aerial vehicle.
Yeah.
So we're not investing in drone body companies. That's a good way to say it. So it's not. What we are looking for are things that I will call either smaller hardware or components. And so for hardware, just very quickly, one of the companies we invested in is called Hymera. They do handheld tactical radios. They are a step above of what the general issue Motorola's are out at the front. They are more secure. They have mesh networks. So they're a sort of more advanced handheld radio. But some of the interesting things, what they are doing is they're starting to sort of coordinate with some of the other new battlefield systems that are being developed. So there's a whole other area that's out there, where they're developing kind of these coordination systems. So you are able to operate drones, you are able to operate the ground vehicles, the UGVs. You can connect the radios to these. So you have a full battlefield position. And this is at a unit level. There's absolutely these things, at the general staff level within Ukraine. But again, there is this incredible ingenuity. And when people see, hey, we need to be able to, just within our theater, out in the front, we need better coordination between the drones, the ground drones. The air drones are two units that are flying drones. You don't want you don't want to be taking down your neighbor's drones.
Yeah.
So all of these new things are being coordinated, and it's being done with technology. And so the integration. So Hymera is also sort of working its way, tapping into the broader battlefield systems. A company called Karadag, who does drone detection and mitigation. They have, again, it's hardware, but they have they are the company that I was talking about when they do nightly updates. And so what their devices do is they collect and register the audio, the acoustics of the drones. So they know every drone by the acoustic signatures. But what they're able to do is also match them against the radio frequencies that they're flying on. So then they are able to do mitigation as well. So they've got the patterns. So all of this is updated. And so the more of these devices that are out there, the more data it is collecting, the more they're able to identify the patterns of what the frequencies are. So all of these things kind of work together.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, we invested in a company called Swarmer. It's largely a software-based company. They have a middleware, but they are working on a product that is essentially one operator and not just a couple, but like tens and 20 drones that are able to not just talk back to the operator, but to themselves. So that's a very exciting
Drones talking to
piece.
each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then there's another company that's actually, it's a communications, it's encrypted communications, not just for radios, but for other devices to talk to each other. And then actually on tomorrow, there is going to be an announcement about a new company that we've invested in as well. So that'll be announced. Yeah.
Cool. I listen to you. You're so excited about what you are talking. Your job, your work, and your startups you're working with, defense tech, emerging each day, each night. How do you feel? What helps you outside of work to be so positive, to be so optimistic, to be so energized, or because
it's
the way you talk about it.
No, but it's the people around
way
me.
you
And
talk
it's all the Ukrainians literally that I interact with on a daily basis. Like I said, there's nobody sitting here feeling sorry for themselves. Everybody is tired. Everybody has days where you just say, I'm not going to get out of bed today. And you pull the covers over your head and you just sleep for 12 hours. But there is such an extraordinary energy here, and there is such a commitment, that especially I will say within. So I spend most of my time with the tech sector or with soldiers, and so for me, anybody who is the soldiers out on the front, there is just such deep respect and admiration. Half of them were not soldiers. Half of them were lawyers, taxi drivers, farmers. They don't want to be out there, but they are out there, and so they are the ones who, I think at the end of the day, are motivating me more than anybody else, because they are defending Ukraine, but they are also defending the values and everything that I grew up believing, was worth fighting for and worth defending. So they are not just defending Ukraine; they are defending the idea of the values and everything that I was, that I completely do believe in. So there's that piece of it. But then there's this whole tech ecosystem that is supporting the soldiers. And I can tell you, most of these guys in tech, there is no such thing as a day off. There is no such thing as a weekend. If they have a weekend, actually what they're doing is going out to the front to do the most recent, testing of the product iteration that they worked on, in their workshops all week. So there is that whole piece of it too. So nobody is sitting around. There is a tremendous energy, and the energy that is behind it is the need to put the tools out in the hands of the soldiers who are defending Ukraine. So that is where this all comes from. And you have to have positive energy to do that. If you have negative energy, there is no forward momentum. There is nothing there. So it is not that this is not an incredibly important, serious thing that Ukraine is doing. And so my energy is not negating like the danger of the system, but it is very much actually acknowledging Ukraine's extraordinary energy that it has of its own, in terms of, again, it's saying we are not taking your decision to invade us as the final word. We have a say in this too. And so it is, everything that lines up in support behind that. Because if you think about it, that is sort of the ultimate validation of life and of understanding that, of freedom and individual determination, not just for any single human, but for societies and the country as a whole. And so that is actually an extremely life-affirming thing in some ways. It is, we want a better life going forward. We want a better life for our children. And so you have to be able to put good energy into that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I got a lot of energy from you from this perspective. I always say that everyone has to do what she can. I think that I'm also very grateful to people who defend us. I'm also now I find out much more because for me, defense tech is like, I know people, as you mentioned, doing a lot of drones and stuff like this, but it's such a complicated thing, I guess, so that for a lot of people who'll be watching us, they will also find out a lot of new things. because we know basic things. Usually we don't even want to get too much. Sometimes it's NDA, sometimes you don't want to ask, to explain or something like that. But people who do these technologies to help us, it's mind-blowing thing. Businesses who are working no matter what, each night, whatever happens each night, in the morning everybody goes to work and goes to cafes and restaurants and galleries and help our economy work, because I always say that economy has to work. I remember during the first year of war, I had this hesitations whether I can have fun when somebody is defending or when somebody is fighting. But with time going on and speaking to people who defend us and helping them with to fundraise money for such things, for defense tech stuff, for equipment. I remember at the beginning we didn't know what to buy. First months of war, you need to buy us something. What is it? We didn't have our production. So we were buying somewhere from abroad, overseas. It was coming. It was not functional. Oh my God. Oh my God. It was so crazy and complicated. But now I think that everybody should be in her place. If it's business, develop your business. If you defend, we are really grateful to you that you defend. If you are a volunteer, we are really thankful to volunteers, because I always say that volunteering in Ukraine is like network, is the best networking ever you can find. I found so many nice people because of that. And it's easy. It's community, and you can come up to any person and he will or she will explain everything to you. So yeah, so many things we have covered today, and the way you talk about it, it's amazing. I would like to listen much more if there was such opportunity, and I guess there are much more people who would like to get to know these things and details. And I think that there will be much more people going into tech industries and developing defense tech industries. I always ask my mom, because she's a teacher in mathematics Lyceum school, and I always ask her to motivate her students to take tech, to learn tech more, because we do need more tech. As you have mentioned, defense tech is developing, and we do need it more and more and more. I'm curious about future. We'll see what it brings. Very interesting times we live in. Thank you for love. You're sharing, like when you talk about Ukraine, you talk as if you are from here, I don't know.
I've been here long enough. I have a funny position. I am both an outsider, but have, enough time now as an insider. And I'm very grateful to Ukraine for the country that it is, just because for me, again, like just both seeing and taking part in all of this is extraordinary. But I've also been very welcomed here. People are extremely welcoming. My daughter, like I said, went to Ukrainian public school, and that, just that we've had the ability to take part in this society. So I am very grateful. So it's very much a two-way street. I appreciate the opportunities.
I really hope that people who watch this podcast, they will find some inspiration.
They should. Ukraine's an incredibly inspiring place. In fact,
Come
I think
here.
if you come to Ukraine and are not inspired, I feel sorry for you. I don't know. And it's a funny thing. You mentioned, like, with humanitarian and all the volunteers, there are so many foreigners in Ukraine right now. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of them volunteering at so many different levels, and it's all of them are here because they want to be here. Nobody has to be here at this point. And I know from just talking to all of the ones that I am in contact with, everybody who comes here feels a little bit of what I was sort of explaining to you, is that there is sort of this intrinsic motivation. What Russia is doing is just wrong. Then there is the defending of the values. But it is the Ukrainian society, I think, really attracts people who value community and who value family and friendship, and just, not the victimhood, the just get on with it, fix the problem, let's move forward. All of these things that for me, growing up in the United States, and this was several decades ago, the United States is slightly fractured right now, but there is sort of this ideal of what, it was, of what America could be in terms of, faith and family and community and friends. That is Ukraine just every single day, every place that you go. If you're out in Lviv, the churches are so crowded. There's people standing outside on the street listening to the services. And so it's such a fascinating thing, because I think a lot of Americans don't recognize that Ukraine is exactly what most of them are like hankering for or wishing for. And it is here, and Ukraine is defending the very values that they believe in. And so, yes, going back to the getting people here, it makes such a big difference. And so I would encourage people to come to Ukraine. Even if you're just going to go to Lviv, it's only an hour from the border.
Yeah, it's close.
It is a perfect place to start and to just get a little picture, a little bit of an understanding of how different Ukraine is from what the image is and what most people's minds is. And I think that would, open their eyes as either investors or supporters or
volunteers. And I always say each kind of help, or each kind of even seeing it and sharing and spreading the word about it, it's also a lot.
It is.
You never know what kind of person
that's
can
enough.
hear you
No,
and what it can change.
For all the people who just even simply put flags out in their front yards and things like that in the West, it's just an acknowledgement, and it keeps it in people's minds. So even people who do things like that, it matters. It's helpful.
Everything matters. Thank you for this for so many facts, and at the same time facts which are not maybe super positive, because it's about war.
The Russians have invaded. It's not super positive. But
but at the same time, acknowledging these things. And you also have showed to me, and I guess to people who are watching it, that Ukraine is not only fighting, but Ukraine is creating. Ukraine is innovating. Ukraine is changing the history, let's call it like this.
Absolutely. It
So
is.
there are much more functions than only, when in newspapers somewhere else, like fighting. It's not only about fight. It's about much more things which are going on right now in Ukraine.
It is. It's the counter. If you look at what Russia is doing, it is largely about death and destruction. What Ukraine is side by side with death and destruction. It is life. It is love. It is creation. It is friendship. It is hope. So it's such a strange, side by side thing, but it's so diametrically opposed about what the Russians are doing and how they're doing it and how Ukraine has responded, which for me, it's in some ways that's what life is. You just make choices in terms of how you're going to do it. And the Ukrainians have just been extraordinary in not only what they've done, but how they've done it and how they are building things going forward.
Thank you. The last question, how do you see the future of Ukraine in 5-10 years from now? How do you imagine it?
I do not have a crystal ball as to how this war at this moment is going to end, but there's a couple of things. There will be so right now 80% of Ukraine is not occupied. It is not fighting. Yes, the Russians are bombing it at night, but 80% of Ukraine is operating, as best it can under the circumstances. So going forward, I think there will be a stop to this phase of the fighting. I think that Ukraine will absolutely continue to arm and build its own defenses so that it is capable of relying upon itself and, is not ever kind of caught off guard again. I think there will be a return to this focus on economic development in Ukraine. I think there will be a continuation of Ukraine's, accession to the EU. I have no idea when that's going to happen. But again, Ukrainian values are so aligned with those of Europe that it is absolutely going to be inevitable that it's, that is the place and the direction that Ukraine is going to continue to evolve. I don't know. Again, if you look in the past, like I said, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Orange Revolution, then Maidan, all of those were dramatic events. And after each one of those, there was just this extraordinary, flowering and just tremendous growth within this country. And so I fully expect that there will be, this growth period after this ends, not only in the context of Reconstruction, which there is that piece of it, but just even all of the other things and the continued focus on Ukrainian culture and all things, that tie Ukraine together. I fully expect that will all continue to grow. I'm very optimistic about where this is all going to go.
Thank you. Let's hope for that. Let's hope. I think that as long as we have such people as you who help us create modern Ukraine, and
Ukrainians are doing it all on your own. All I'm doing is,
together.
as a foreigner, telling others what I see here.
and
This is all
building
Ukraine.
bridges. That's important as well, right? Building bridges between countries and people
Absolutely.
and companies. Thank
Absolutely.
you for building these bridges. Thank you for being a voice for us. It's really important. Thank you for speaking about Ukraine in such a way. It's really touching. Thank you for doing what you are doing, and I really hope that you have some time to rest. And because it seems like never-ending circle of work, I do wish you to find time to rest, because in a way, in your way, right? Because everybody needs.
No. I go out to Zakarpattia and I go up into the
Zakarpattia.
mountains and I don't bring my phone and I just
no phone days are
breathe,
perfect.
Breathe the high mountain air and take in the good energy out there, and I come back refreshed after a couple of days.
That's a perfect thing to do in mountains. Yeah, and thank you for being our voice. That's important.
Thank you. You're making me feel uncomfortable.
Thank you. It's important. It's important from my side to say it. And I really wish you a lot of fruitful cooperations, because it's about community and building bridges and cooperation. And nice companies ahead to bring as many people here as possible. I will be working on it as well. I told you that once I see some people who are eager to come, I'm like, I will cover everything. Let's do it. Don't worry. We will do it because people need to come and to see it. And I really wish you, all of us, to build Ukraine we see in years, because there are a lot of things to come. And thank you again for showing that Ukraine is really innovative and really creative.
It is indeed. It is
Thank
indeed.
you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time and the chance to talk about this. Thanks.
I really thank you for your time.